Hey everyone, I'm Matt and welcome to the Good Trouble Show. The release of the 3 U.S. Navy UAP videos as part of the 2017 New York Times story marked a turning point in the UAP conversation. Before the 2017 article, another video was released in 2013 that generated a lot of buzz. The Aquadila UAP FLIR footage filmed by U.S. Customs and Border Patrol agents in Puerto Rico. Today, Director Darcy Weir will discuss his latest film about UAPs in Puerto Rico, including the Aquadila case. But first, please hit the subscribe and thumbs up button. I'm tongue-tied today. On YouTube, leave a comment and let us know what you think about this episode. You can also find us on X at Good Trouble Show and everywhere else at The Good Trouble Show. You can also find us wherever you enjoy your podcasts. Search for The Good Trouble Show with Matt Ford. And if you would like to chip in to help keep the lights on, you can become a Patreon member of The Good Trouble Show by going to www.patreon.com/The Good Trouble Show. Sign up and you can support our work. Our guest today is a documentary filmmaker who has produced over 15 films covering everything from Bitcoin to UAP. Here to discuss his latest film, Transmedium, Puerto Rico's UFOs, please welcome Director Darcy Weir. Darcy, how are you, sir?
I'm good, Matt. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Good to have you back. So how goes the documentary filmmaking world?
It's busy. It's independent. Yeah, it's moving and grooving. Trying to find some interesting stories to cover for sure.
We last had you on for your film Transmedium, Fast Movers and USOs. It sounds like as if your interest in UAPs has not waned at all.
No, not at all. It's stronger than ever.
Now, you just released your latest work, Transmedium, UAPs in Puerto Rico, which I watched last night, and I have to say it was really fantastic. I loved it. Let's watch the clip.
Darcy Weir is an independent researcher and filmmaker who has traveled around the world to study the UFO phenomenon.
Very under-the-radar release of some videos and documents out with no explanation. All of a sudden, Customs and Border Patrol has released 10 videos from what looks like forward-looking infrared cameras.
Muchos vecinos de las áreas cercanas al lugar.
Andy and I, becoming friends, decided to embark on a journey to find the individual responsible for leaking this video to the public. And our journey into the UFO mysteries of Puerto Rico's history began.
This source 9 said that he would be willing to talk to you about the incident with the Transmedium UFO tonight.
Antes que comience, que realmente que sabe.
And just like that, the footage you see here started being recorded because the CBP FLIR camera operator saw something flying in the airspace over Rafael Hernandez Airport. In the middle of the ocean, on October 11th at approximately 10 p.m., Columbus stated he and Pedro Gutierrez, while on the deck of the Santa Maria, observed a light glimmering at a great distance. It vanished and reappeared several times during the night. How long has the UFO phenomena been present around Puerto Rico?
They actually changed the procedure for reporting right after, the access procedure, I guess.
Yeah, after that, they changed all the procedures that...
This object is reminiscent of an orb that I saw while testing a similar FLIR model out back after repair in December 2016. I couldn't quite determine the size of the object because there was nothing relative to compare it to.
This is supposed to be what you call a nuclear plant. What? But it never did work, and there's always 24 hours military people there.
Really? Did it melt down?
No.
Wait. Hold on. That's a nuclear? No, yeah. It was going to be, but it never turned out.
It never turned out, no.
But why would there still be...
That's a triangle.
You took that?
Yeah, that's one at 8:30 or 9 in the morning, but the light was so strong.
And you took that when you were on a boat?
In a boat.
When we're coming from almost 10 minutes from here, I saw something.
that cross from one side of the road to the other. But was so fast that I can't see what it was. When I put the highlight, looked like something, a monkey, something biological. Yeah, something cross. When I put
Yeah, I have to admit, last night when I was watching the thing on my Apple TV, and I'm watching it, and the little green guy comes shooting in from camera right, I jumped a little bit in my chair. It was a bit of a surprise. So Darcy, what made you decide to cover UAP cases in Puerto Rico?
Well, Puerto Rico just kind of came up on my radar over and over again. Really, at the end of the last Transmedium documentary, I met with my friend Andy Marciel in New York City, which is where he's from. And he's Puerto Rican. We kept in touch and talked about other credible cases. This is the individual who released the Department of Homeland Security UAP footage, which is like the A-10 Warthog, La Bruja, and the rubber duck footage, which all were very contentious at the time within the UFO community. But later, as you could see at the beginning of the trailer, Department of Homeland Security through CBP released at the end of August 13th, their documents relating to those UAP videos, stating that they were authentic anomalous objects, that they could not categorize them as something that they're used to seeing, like cartel activity or illegal immigrants trying to get over the border or what have you, right? With some kind of craft that they made or whatever. But we started talking, Andy and I, and we talked about the Aquadila footage, the 2013 Aquadila UAP footage. And when he was like, we should go to Puerto Rico and film there and speak to experiencers because there's just so many throughout history. He gave me the email for Jorge Martin. And this is a journalist. He's kind of like the George Knapp of UFOs in Puerto Rico. He's been covering this beat for like 4 decades.
Is he as salty as George Knapp?
Yeah, for sure.
I love George Knapp.
Yeah, he's the best. But essentially, when I reached out to Jorge the very first time, I was talking about potential stories we could cover that have happened in Puerto Rico, that we could meet with credible witnesses that are still alive. And he said, well, do you want to meet the man who released the Aquadila 2013 footage, the leaker? And I was like, yeah.
That's a pretty easy question to answer.
Yeah, so that pretty much like cemented the deal for me. And I was busy planning flights and organizing accommodation and trying to speak to people via email and phone and get to the bottom of their story and try to book a meeting with them in Puerto Rico. We were there for about just a little over 10 days.
Wow.
And, if you watch the documentary, the very first case is the Aquadila stuff, but that was actually one of the last cases that we filmed. It took a while before this individual would actually come forward and finally meet with us and allow us to record that interview.
So were you pretty close to him, like deciding to bail? Like, did it take a lot of cajoling in the beginning to make sure this guy, decides to show? How hesitant was he? And what were the reasons for his hesitancy?
Well, I mean, if you talk to Ross Coulthart right now, there is a standing order within Department of Homeland Security that all personnel cannot share their files between departments. It's very locked down now since UAP has become a popular thing. They were also mentioned in as, being interested in the Kona Blue project during the Arrow Report time. But even this interview happened before that, but the environment where everything's very locked down, information can't be shared between departments, everything's kind of like classified, for lack of a better word. That's been going on for maybe 2 years now. So he still works within that same sort of umbrella of CBP, and he just doesn't want to lose his job. He doesn't want to be personally attacked. We both know that the community debunkers and so on and so forth can go after people personally. I've felt it myself. So this individual just doesn't want to be public because of those reasons. And so it took a little while to convince him that, we wouldn't reveal his identity. We wouldn't show his face. We changed his voice a little bit for the doc too. So, yeah.
Yeah, I completely understand it. The guy's got to protect his livelihood, and of course, no one wants the kind of harassment that tends to come with this whole thing. So back to like Puerto Rico in general, when you were looking at doing research and doing this film, did you find that the Puerto Rican cases differed any from the rest of the world in terms of UAPs?
Well, yeah, there's just a lot of ocean-based phenomenon, right? So we've been cataloging and reporting UFOs, sky-based unidentified flying objects for decades, but the sort of USO side of things is a little bit more prevalent in places like this, like Puerto Rico. But then you've also got places like Guadalupe Island that, Sean Cahill and Lou have reported on, lots of activity happening around there. Essentially the same sort of theme that you get when you're talking to people there is that the fishermen are constantly seeing this activity, both in and around Puerto Rico and Guadalupe Island.
Did you find that the local culture and sort of environment, did it influence the film's narrative at all? And was there much talk about being inside the Bermuda Triangle? And do people think that has anything to do, like the fishermen, do they think that has anything to do with all of the UAP sightings?
Yeah, UAP are not really commonly, I guess, shared as a open phenomenon to Puerto Ricans. They still are very a Christian, almost like Gnostic nation in terms of identifying the phenomenon as like demonic or angelic or, some kind of, I kind of felt like Phil Hartman, the caveman attorney or something, when I was listening to some of these explanations, like, demons and stuff like that. But it's not widely accepted there. I mean, Jorge Martin is covering this and he's very open to it. And a lot of people, there is a MUFON organization there, and there are like other groups that are kind of UFO researchers, but en masse, it's not widely accepted. It's very taboo to discuss it.
Yeah, I was curious, like how people you would go and talk to, say like fishermen, like how did they react to your investigative work? Was there any pushback? Was there, hey, you shouldn't be looking into this, it's demonic? Or, hey, I've got a story I want to tell you?
Yeah, I did interview this one individual just preliminarily. We didn't interview him on the island because he kind of rage quit when we realized we weren't like going in his narrative direction. But he's a like a very Christian individual. I'm not knocking Christians at all. I think everybody is in right, to have their own belief systems and stuff. But he was really pushing that negative demon thing. And I did want to cover a story while we were over there. One of these prevalent abduction cases, this individual named Amaury Rivera. This guy, if you look into him, he took photos after he was abducted, and the disc was being like paced by F-4 fighter craft. And it's really interesting, but when he came out, he said, like, he had an analytical mind about it and was being very sort of scientific in his analysis of it. But this individual glommed onto the story and tried to publish a book that Amaury's whole encounter was with like demons. And so that guy got upset and pushed back on us even talking to him when we said that we were kind of going the UFO route.
Yeah, that's too bad. Did you have any issues with the local government?
No, because we were very like under the radar. We weren't really I guess announcing our arrival as a film crew and so on, right? Like, I've got my gear. It's like me, myself, and I setting up the audio, the cameras, and Andy was instrumental in speaking the native tongue and helping me like confirm things and get the interviews and stuff like that. Like he was a really important, integral person to securing a lot of this information.
Now,
because he speaks Spanish.
Oh, sure. Okay. So let's talk about the films themselves. Tell us about the case and why they were so unique.
Yeah, so the Aquadila footage that we kind of pour over at first, we speak to the agent that initially secured that footage from CBP and then leaked it to Jorge Martin, and then Jorge was the one that released it to the public back in 2013. And this footage was recorded in April. The object is seen flying at first over an airplane, the tarmac, and actual crew that are standing around on the tarmac, not too high above either.
But they couldn't see it.
Pardon?
They couldn't see it, though. Like this was just on IR. And we'll play the film in just a second, and I have you comment a little bit about it. But this was strictly, they could only detect it on the FLIR. Like, to your naked eye, people could not see the object, correct?
That is 100% correct. Yeah. Supposedly, the CBP agent reported that right before they hit record on that FLIR camera, it was actually confirmed from the FLIR camera operator, hey, are you seeing this? Because he spoke to the pilot, the other personnel that were on the plane, as well as the control tower, right, of Rafael Hernandez International Airport. And all three sources could not see this object with their naked eye. It was only through the FLIR camera footage that they were able to follow this object and track it. So this is a common occurrence with UAP activity. It seems like they're almost able to cloak themselves from our human eye visible spectrum most of the time.
And had your contact at Customs Border and Protection, had he ever witnessed anything like this before, or had, once he had this film, I'm sure they were talking quite a bit with their colleagues, had other people in their organization, in Customs Border and Protection, had they ever come across anything similar? Or was this like really the first time they had ever experienced this thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. The actual agent had seen things and heard of people seeing things within not only the agency, but it comes back to fishermen, because that is one of the number one economic activities of Puerto Rico, being an island surrounded by the waters in the Atlantic. They fish a lot. And so he was hearing all these reports of fishermen seeing like essentially non-human intelligence at night going onto the beaches, going off the beaches, and objects illuminating under the water, going into the water, coming out of the water that obviously, had no traditional flight surfaces and looked like your traditional like saucer or almond-shaped object or, cigar-shaped stuff, that type of thing.
The one part that I thought was really interesting in the film is that what looks like is supposed to be a nuclear reactor, but looking at it, that doesn't look like it was meant to be any sort of nuclear reactor at all. Did you see this thing up close and personal?
Oh yeah. Like I wasn't inside the facility, but we were walking around the perimeter of the fence. I was getting my legs all cut up because I wore shorts that day by like weird thorn bushes and stuff. But we were trying to get to this area called Domes Beach. And when we met with Alberto Perez, who actually, he and his sister were setting up a security camera at their parents' place. And they saw in the distance, because they're on a bit of a hill that overlooks the water, they saw this object hovering over the ocean, and then it dived into the ocean and created a splash. There's 3 pictures they took, which I have, but essentially Alberto was telling us that, all this activity happens in that area. It happens in this area over by Domes Beach. And we're like, Domes Beach, okay. So we have no idea why it's significant. The name is called Dome. He's saying surfers go there. It's a really popular place. We end up arriving to the parking lot, and you see this big metallic structure, like a big metal dome, and right out front, like an atomic atom statue. And like we were like, what the heck is this?
Right.
And he's like, oh, that's the dome. And I'm like, and he's like, it was supposed to be a nuclear power plant. But obviously, like, as one may note, if you look at a traditional nuclear power plant, the silos go up and they vent out steam and stuff. So this, whatever it is, has to be some kind of research facility that they haven't fully closed, because Alberto and the locals have reported military personnel going in and out, and it's fully fenced off with barbed wire and stuff, and you can't go in. There was like a truck parked out front. They have security personnel 24/7 guarding it.
Wow. Okay. All right. So it's not some abandoned facility for some reason. Whatever's in there, they don't want people getting at.
Yeah, and it's just interesting because you also hear about like UFO activity happening around nuclear power plants all the time, right? So I guess it's an interesting link to what they're seeing around that beach.
Any idea that the security personnel that are around it, can you tell, are they private contractors or are they active duty military? Did you see any of them yourself?
We saw the truck. That looked like a private contractor, but from Alberto Perez's testimony, there must be actual military that are actively going in and out, because they, Marines are seen coming from the beach and going into the facility.
Wow. Yeah, that definitely does not sound like a commercial nuclear power plant. I mean, who knows what they're doing there. So let's get back to the film itself. Now, one thing that I had always thought, now I always say I'm new to the whole ufology thing, my kind of knowledge of this whole thing is similar to a piece of Swiss cheese with a bunch of holes in it. I had always thought that this video came out following the 2017 New York Times article that, of course, had Lou Elizondo in there and the 3 Navy films, but this actually came out before, correct?
Yeah, so it came out in soon after it was recorded in 2013. It didn't really pick up steam until like the SCU, Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, poured over it. Robert Powell did a really good job of, explaining it can't be a Mylar balloon or a latex balloon. I did get wind recently through a friend in the community that there is going to be a popular science expose done on this, just like NASA did with the Go Fast, the gimbal, and the Tic Tac. They debunked it with Dirt Patrick. They're going to be doing that again.
Oh yeah, of course.
But they're doing it for the Aquadilla footage. And I can confirm they're going to say it's a bird.
Unbelievable. But looking at one of the things that I thought was really cool about the footage is when people that aren't used to looking at FLIR footage, it's a lot of times kind of hard to tell what you're looking at. It's hard to understand the scale, but I thought what was really great about how you presented it is you took that footage and it was like you did some overlays of like, here are some cars, here's a piece of land, or this is a parking lot. And what it did for me is it helped me understand the scale of this thing, which I think you indicated was about the size of a car. And I'll play. I know I keep jabbering on, so we'll play the footage here. But yeah, actually, this is now a good time to do it. So what are we looking at?
So this is actually as it's just past the tarmac of the Rafael Hernandez Airport. It looks very almond shaped, which is exactly what they reported. Both the FLIR camera operator and the personnel that were looking at it on the screen. We interviewed Dave Falch, who is a FLIR camera professional repairman. He actually repairs systems like this. We think it was filmed on an MX-15. You can see it's actually rotating there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Doesn't seem to have fluttering wings like you would expect from a goddamn bird.
Right.
But it also has this weird edge aberration like effect that Dave Fulch said might be an artifact from the actual FLIR camera system, trying to keep track of it. But the object was flying. You could see it's over land. This is a close-up. You can see it's quite round. And it's being filmed in black hot, forward-looking infrared, very high-quality camera footage. You see it's going over a pond there, or the pond was in the distance.
Right.
You could see tarmac, and it's pretty low. Like, it's not high up in the sky. So I have spoken to Mark D'Antonio about this footage. He, is a skeptic of some UAP footage out there, but he was trying to attribute this to being just a balloon that was being picked up by the wind and blown in the wind. The problem with that theory is that an object like this does not actually fly against the wind, which it would have been doing when it heads to the ocean later, because the wind is actually coming off of the beach. And when they recorded this, before they hit record, it was seen coming from the ocean. It did a full circle around the airport, around a neighborhood, over a parking garage, over literally highway, like a street where you could see cars moving underneath. And then it went towards the ocean, over the beach, into the ocean. And so that's when we see the object apparently duplicate in the water, and both the objects go down in the ocean and elude the FLIR camera tracking. So there's a number of things happening there. A, it's not a bird. When we did an interview, Dave Fulch, who is a camera repairman professionally of this FLIR system, he showed examples of what the jet stream of a fighter jet would look like in FLIR, a mylar balloon or a latex balloon, and a bird, right? Like it will just, or a drone, for example, right? A drone, actually, you see the full drone articulated in an MX-15 system. It doesn't show up as like an orb or something strange like that. So, you know, you can rule out all that stuff. I think what Robert Kirkpatrick, or sorry, Sean Kirkpatrick, I think what Sean Kirkpatrick and this other famous physicist from a university that's linked to NASA, they're planning to debunk this as a bird. But when it goes to the ocean, because the sensor is picking up the temperature variation of the ocean environment, which would be cooler from the land, that compared to the temperature of the object, it throws off the FLIR tracking and makes it look like it's duplicating, which doesn't make any sense if it is a bird, because a bird doesn't cool down to ocean temperatures within like seconds, right? The footage was 4 minutes long that was recorded. The interaction was probably about 6 minutes, so 2 minutes of observation before they filmed it. That combined with the CBP agents' accounts of fishermen seeing all kinds of stuff come out of the ocean around the airport, because on that side of the island is actually where the ocean trench is. You know, it just seems pretty eerie. It seems like something we could equate to a non-human intelligence operating in that area.
Well, the other thing watching that film is, if that's a bird, that is one of the fastest birds I've ever seen. And certainly I've never seen a balloon fly in a perfectly straight line. And then finally too, what were the reported winds at the airport that day?
I think you can actually see in the FLIR footage itself, we have it like the full heads up display information. It shows the miles per hour in the top right. It's got to be around like 100 or something like that. So yeah, fastest bird on the planet. Doesn't look like a bird in FLIR footage. Flying against the wind as a mylar balloon. And you know, also we show what a mylar balloon looks like in FLIR. It looks like a shiny mylar balloon, and it flutters. Like constantly the wind is going to jostle that.
Right.
It would not be able to keep a uniform speed and trajectory.
And the thing I want to know too is this debunking that you're saying, this what is it, a physicist that is doing this along with Sean Kirkpatrick?
Yeah, it's I believe it's going to be Joshua Semeter, who was used at the NASA UAP panel to debunk the Go Fast UFO footage.
Well, and my question is, why is Sean Kirkpatrick still out there parroting Pentagon talking points about UAPs? He works for the Department of Energy. This isn't even his department anymore. It's so freaking corrupt. It's not even, don't get me started.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the powers that be pushing back on a narrative that they don't want the mainstream scientific community to look at and take seriously. And so they'll use prevalent mainstream scientists to debunk it, just like the Condon report was used during the Project Blue Book days.
You know what I should do? I should try and do a simultaneous live stream to compete with the NASA thing, and I'll put like a real scientist on, like Dr. Kevin Knuth. We all know Sean Kirkpatrick just plays a scientist and on TV. He certainly can't write any kind of report. That's for sure. At least, well, I mean, maybe he can on fifth grader level, but that's about it. So maybe that'll be our competing programming is we'll do our analysis of these videos, but with a real honest to God scientist. Now one of the things I'd love to hear a little bit more about, the gentleman that you had on that was talking about on your film, that was talking about seeing kids playing on the beaches. Tell us a bit about that. That was totally creeped me out. That was after the little green guy came on the screen and made me jump out of my seat.
Yeah, so I guess like some of the animation was just kind of to illustrate something that they might have seen, but it's not exact.
Sure.
And it may seem a little bit cartoonish to people, but Oh,
I liked it.
I'm not Sony Studio or something like that. It's me, myself, and I again. But my friend actually Fettuccini helped me with doing those illustrations, and then we animated them.
Awesome.
But so essentially, there's a number of people on Puerto Rico that have been seeing these non-human entities. Interestingly enough, I mentioned that a Mauri Rivera case earlier. He's a good man. He went through a lot of trouble with his testimony and releasing these pictures back in the day. But he said the first thing he saw before he was on board what was a craft was these kind of gray alien looking things. And, they had like kind of white, opaque skin, super white compared to even me. And they had the big sort of classic almond shaped eyes and stuff like that. And they were kind of like this servant class, almost like android that was doing work for a human, literally a human looking, possibly non-human intelligence. And these guys, believe it or not, were like what looked like an Indian from India, like an Asian man.
Mm-hmm.
So he could identify this was not like a Puerto Rican. And this guy said he came from a different star, different planet, that they are related to us, and that, they're worried about our future. And he was showing like, basically future dystopic realities that are going to play out on the planet that cause a lot of destruction and hardship for people. And it was kind of like a warning and an intervention sort of presentation. That person, a Maori, did not only have that sort of experience. This other person, Andres Maldonado, who's a commercial diver, does scientific studies of the ocean reef stuff, the ecology of the ocean, let's say. And Andres Maldonado also met the same entity because it had a name named Amaran. And it's fascinating because this is like a contactee sort of narrative that you will hear over and over again. There's like apparently human looking extraterrestrials or something that are meeting contactees, and they have like these more robotic gray looking things that do stuff for them. And even Michael P. Masters has documented this really well in his thesis with his various books.
Absolutely. Okay, so how can folks find your film?
They can watch it on Apple TV, or I think Google Play, Vudu, Fandango now. These are the major platforms it's on right now. Amazon, for whatever reason, would not take it.
Unbelievable. Did they give you any reason for it? I mean, it's a really great film. I loved it.
I appreciate that, man. Yeah, they do not, and they reserve the right to outright reject any content that is submitted to them. So you're lucky to get on these days. A lot of people are, I guess, inundating them with new content, and this one didn't make it there.
Yeah, I'm very sorry to hear that. Can you talk about what your next project is?
Yeah, I'm working on a bunch of different projects. Some stuff that's in development for TV that is USO related, and so I'm excited about that. And then I'm also doing my own independent stuff that's kind of in the same sort of line as this documentary, where I'm going after some new information about some stories that are from the past in regards to UFOs, like the prevalent abduction case of Pascagoula, 1973. And another project is involving ESP, psi-related stuff, and non-human intelligence.
Fantastic. Well, like I said, I really enjoyed the film. I thought it was fantastic. It brought a lot of context and information to me. Certainly, I knew so little about it, and looking at that thing, there's no way it's a bird or balloon. But debunkers are going to debunk, and former directors of AARO are going to pretend to be an actual scientist. So no surprise there. But hey, thanks for coming on. Always enjoy having you, and we'll definitely have you back on your next film.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Good to see you again, man.
Awesome. Okay, Darcy Weir, ladies and gentlemen.